Outgoing chair of the SADC Organ on Politics, Defence and Security Cooperation, Dr. Naledi Pandor of South Africa, has congratulated Kenya for holding peaceful elections. She also wished the mounting Kingdom of Lesotho as well as Angola well as they prepare for their upcoming national elections. The Kingdom of Lesotho is back on the agenda as it battles to reconvene the 10th Parliament to complete the reform process under the state of emergency, should His Majesty the King deem fit to do so.
For the regional body SADC, this past year has been a busy one and often required several meetings to deal with regional issues. But in the upcoming phase, the region will mostly be preoccupied with national elections.
I'd like to join the Executive Secretary in wishing Lesotho as well as Angola well in the upcoming elections and hope that they will have a peaceful, fair, and very stable election. I also believe that as the organ, we should congratulate our brothers and sisters of Kenya for the election which appears to have proceeded smoothly.
But on the agenda, once again, it is Lesotho still battling with the reforms, and this time attempting a bold move to reconvene a collapsed 10th Parliament.
It is therefore so debilitating that in that last minute that we have failed to proceed with the Lesotho reform process. It is still critical that we must. So as leader of government, I'm looking at the options that we face. One of the options is to recall Parliament, and I'm working with my lawyers to see what is required for us to recall Parliament for a very brief period of time to come and deal with their unfinished business.
Meanwhile, an expert on the use of ICT in elections management says the use of technology will help bring transparency and credibility to the outcome of the election results, provided the necessary processes are adhered to.
Technology is not a panacea for all electoral problems, but it is a tool like any other tool that you can use. Without human being, it cannot work. I always say if you got your process and procedure manually correctly, it shouldn't be difficult for you to get the automation of that process. But the challenge is sometimes people tend to rush to automate the processes of which are still difficult manually. If I were to explain to me, how do you want a register to appear in the register? If you cannot explain that manually, then it will be a bit of a challenge for you to automate that.
Mapepe insists that even when there are delays in declaring results, if the process is transparent, it helps calm the anxious parties.
The electoral process is always based on the legal system. It is legal. Sometimes the delay is caused because certain legal steps have to be followed. And then because it's a critical process, everybody is careful to ensure that no mistakes are done. But like you are saying, it should be easy. So number one of the challenges you may find that some of the staff that are working for EMBs are ad hoc staff that have been employed only for elections. And sometimes you have people who are also there with their own political agenda. It's a bit of mixed factors that contributes to that. The challenge is sometimes these things are done in a very, very ad hoc manner without properly following the proper standards of ICT. Whether you are in elections, whether it is banking industry, whether it is utility industry, there are some certain basic rules that you have to follow. I will make a typical example. Now, if I capture a bad picture now, it doesn't matter how I will want to improve the quality of that picture. It will still show that the original capturing of this picture, the input is bad. So that is one thing. So sometimes we want to correct the output of the results when we did not correct the input.
The Lesotho IEC has confirmed that it has corrected all the 20 constituencies in line with the court ruling, while on the other hand, the country awaits the reconvening of the collapsed 10th Parliament. Rapelang Radebe, SABC News, Masego Lesotho.
All right, let's discuss steps now to Lesotho's road to elections. SABC Correspondent in Maseru, Lesotho, as you've just heard, Rapelang Radebe joins us now. Rapelang, so just give us a sense of, as we're drawing closer to the date when Lesotho is supposed to, really go to the polls, what is still outstanding? There have been a number of red flags that have been noted by various security and peace agencies.
Indeed, Mr. Piso, and greetings to the viewers. It has been a rather rocky and patchy road, considering that the parliament actually just, its time, I think, fell when it was just about to pass the omnibus bill, which will pave a way to reforms being implemented and put as to law. This means now says for them to reconvene again, the Prime Minister needs to advise His Majesty. He needs to convince him to declare a state of emergency, such that the 10th Parliament can be reconvened. I think this was the dilemma that the Prime Minister was facing when he had to go and table the report to SADC. There was a bit of agitation on the ground for people saying for him to activate the state of emergency, it gives him way too much power. And some people were saying, how much power can he use, sometimes even abuse, while in that era? Yes, he said it's going to be very few days just for them to specifically have a mandate that will complete this task of putting this omnibus bill into law. But these are little challenges, I think, that come before the date of the 7th of October.
Now, we understood that last month the omnibus bill was still at committee stages. So just share with us what needs to happen before these issues are resolved, before we get to other things, including the proliferation of parties, the floor crossing, the instability of opposition parties that has been raised as a concern as well.
Well, the truth is the omnibus bill was designed, I think, in a very smart way, such that you juggle together all key or important parts of the reforms and you club them into one bill. I think it was a smart move because it is very hard or near impossible to complete all the reforms at a go. It is a process. But I think the intention was that before the elections, the laws that refer to electoral reforms that can actually control the floor crossing and amongst others, these were themed into 7 thematic regions, of which they said, let us target these 7 thematic regions, which include the parliament, the IEC, the security sector, and the parliamentary reforms. So club them into one bill such that at least this can be developed even after I was understanding that the reforms process is ongoing. But it was important that this omnibus bill at least passes. Now, the final part of your question was that they needed at least 2 to 3 hours, I think, to complete that process. But unfortunately, when 12 o'clock struck on that day, everything that was on hand had to be stopped because that was the lapsing of the 10th Parliament. Now they need to reconvene as the 10th Parliament such that all those laws can be recognized.
Okay. And on other issues, it's been noted that you need to have the political parties themselves pledge to peaceful elections, that they prevent any violence during the polls. One would imagine that that is almost such as an obvious thing to do, but what needs to happen for there to be a sense that the political parties are working collectively for a conducive environment to free and fair elections?
Indeed, the challenge with Lesotho is that the era before and during elections is really never problematic. the elections are always peaceful, the canvassing, there's freedom of speech. The problem is always the post-election conflict. And I think this is where the parties at least have signed up to have free, fair elections, but it is always what happens after the elections that is where we need to be much more sensitive. Now, recognizing that the presence of the current Prime Minister Majoro, he does not have much because it's his last term. He's definitely not coming back in the next term, and he's not even canvassing for any position. I think, as far as I'm concerned, he'll probably be an ordinary member. Well, we think he can be a middleman that can actually help in this transition when he still has power to make sure that the interests of the nation, more than of personalities or parties, are actually upheld. I think that could be an advantage that Lesotho has, such that the transition to the next government is much more smoother, lessening a possibility of a conflict.
Now, the depoliticizing of the security forces, particularly the army, has also been a major issue given their involvement in the past, and a legitimate leader at the helm of the Lesotho government. Now that the king is playing what should be seen as a neutral role in trying to prevent this from happening, is there a sense that that can be prevented from happening? The security forces playing an undue role in complicating the elections?
Absolutely, most brilliant question. I think for the first time I have observed elections in Lesotho as early as 2007, 2012, 2015, 2017, with a bit of confidence. One can say the security details, the army mostly, has been so professional that the sense on the ground is such that it has become most neutral, such that before elections, during the time of elections, they have played a more of a peaceful role, non-interfering when it comes to politicians. But of course, the situation is always so volatile. Sometimes the police are the ones who tends to get caught up in the political factions, most of them jumping from their positions. Now politics complicates things a bit, unlike the military, where you can hardly find military people coming back into politics, joining them. But I think the role that the current leader of the defense force is playing has brought back some confidence. Therefore, I think elevating the trust and the role that they do to keep things normal, and politicians not knowing that they cannot run to the military for them to fight their battles.
And finally, of concern, Rapelang, was the issue of civic education ahead of the elections. How much headway has been made in that regard?
The presence of the Friends of Lesotho, the development partners, I think they have contributed greatly to sensitize and to make sure that the civic education, it is there and available. And I think by hosting a lot of platforms, I think also the reforms process was able for the first time to unpack the ambitions of an ordinary Lesotho, to go into them, such that they can club them and actually allow them to air the kind of parliament they want to see, the justice system and the security that they want. So for the first time, I think they were able to actually put them on pen and paper and say, this is the Lesotho we want and this is how we want it. So I think that has sort of brought some of these issues into attention, such that people are more conscious. I think that's the word I wanted to see, in relation to what it is they expect. The manifestos that the politicians are bringing forward, they are now demanding that it becomes more of issues, more than political history or where people really would want to lean towards politically, but rather about issues and service delivery.
All right, thank you, Rapelang. We're going to leave it there. My colleague in Lesotho, Rapelang Radebe, on the latest in terms of preparations ahead of Lesotho's October elections.